welcome to Winning Realty. We are going to go over the residential purchase agreement, also known as the offer. My name is Randy, and I am the broker and owner of Winning Realty. If you are watching this video, you are likely about to put an offer in on a home, and I just want to say congratulations. All right, let's dive right in, guys. So basically, you're going to note that the residential purchase agreement, right at the top, your realtor probably already has a date put in there. That is the date that the offer was written. All right, your names as the buyer should be in this line right here, filling in this area. Hereby offers to purchase, the address of the property is going to be right there on line 5. All right. Within the city of incorporated area of whether it be Las Vegas, Henderson, North Las Vegas, Pahrump, it's going to have the city information right there. The county of Clark, typically if it's in Las Vegas, Nye if it's over in Pahrump, and the state, okay, state of Nevada. The zip code is going to be right there. You're going to note that the APN number, okay, this is going to be filled in by your real estate agent. What is an APN number? Well, every property, whether it be land or a home, is going to have a parcel number that helps the clerk's office denote where and where that property is. So it's pretty much the clerk's office number that is going to be put right there. All right, so that helps us verify that the property you are purchasing, the address does match, and bam, they are golden. Now the fun part. How much are we purchasing this property for? That number will go right here in number form, and then it's going to follow down here in written out form. All right. And the purchase price on the said terms and conditions contained here within. The buyer. Now this is where your lender's eyes are going to initially go, if you are getting a loan, of course. The buyer does or does not intend to occupy the property as a residence. If you do intend to occupy this property, this must be checked. If you are buying this property as an investment or buying it to have folks rent it out from you or what have you, okay, or as a guest house, for example, or a vacation home, you do not intend to occupy it as your primary residence. This box should be checked. Now, getting into the fun part, the buyer's offer. What are we offering to buy this house for, or this plot of land for, and what are the terms per se on our offer? That is all going to be labeled out right here in section 1, the financial terms and conditions. A, all right, an earnest money deposit. You are going to note that that is also called the EMD. This is the buyer's skin in the game per se. This is if you default as a buyer on a property, okay, due to something that you just default, you just want to pull out of the deal and you're past all your contingencies, you will be losing this amount of money. Okay, whatever you put in this section right here that the seller is demanding typically in order to even accept your offer, the dollar amount will be put right there. Is it being presented with this offer? Or typically you're going to note that it's being wired. So this box right here will be checked and the verbiage on this line will say wired within so many days. Then moving on, you're going to see acceptance. Upon acceptance, earnest money to be deposited within 1 business day from acceptance of the offer, as defined in section 23 here within. Or this is typically where we follow up with, or we will usually put 3 days, okay, if wired to, and then this is going to name who it's being wired to. You're going to note that we typically go through and use the escrow holder, the title company. Gone are the days where the brokers actually hold the money, okay, whether it be the buyer's broker or the seller's broker. We like to have a third party actually hold your money and distribute it at however they distribute it and do what they do. So it's being held at usually the title company. So you're going to note that this box is usually going to be checked. Now, make a mental note. Checks are not typically being accepted by title companies as earnest money any longer. But if you do write a bad check, there is a felony in the state, and so don't write bad checks in a nutshell. All right, moving on. B, additional deposit. Now, this is to be placed in escrow on or before, and if you are doing an additional deposit, this is not usually a common thing. One, you would go through and put the additional deposit amount here, and two, you would have to put the date there. And moving on, the additional deposit will or will not be considered part of the earnest money deposit, the EMD. Okay. Now, where this is key, if your realtor checked will, if you default on this purchase, not only will this amount that you had initially put up there for earnest money be up for grabs, but also this additional deposit. Now, some agents like to write their offers so that both of these are in play to be grabbed by a seller in case of a default if they're very confident that their buyers are in on the deal and want to purchase and definitely aren't going to be backing out in any way, shape, or form. It makes your offer look much stronger if there's more skin in the game. Okay, but the reality of it is you do not have to have that part of the EMD. So if you do back out of the deal and you are past all your contingencies, if this box was checked right here, you will get whatever this amount is. Now, if you are past your contingencies, you will lose this amount up here. Okay, just make a mental note of that. C, this agreement is contingent upon the buyer qualifying for a new loan. There's multiple types of different loans out there: conventional, FHA, VA, or other. Okay, if you're getting one of those other ones, you have to specify what type of loan it is. All right. Now, the way that this is going to work is, let's use the number 200,000 for a number's sake. All right. Uh, if the seller is requesting a $1,000 earnest money to show that you are serious on this deal, okay, the $1,000 would be written out right here. All right. If you are getting a conventional loan, let's say that the conventional loan requires you to do 10% down for number's sake. Well, that means that you have to pay 10%. They will go through and pay the other 90%. 10% on 200,000 means that you would have to go through and pay at least $20,000. So for number's sake, the amount that the conventional loan will cover is $180,000. That amount would go right here. Now, moving on, we're going to skip on down. The balance of the purchase price, which is right here. If you did 1,000 up here, you did 80,000 or 180,000, sorry, right here. That means that you've already done $181,000. Okay, the balance would be the $19,000 remaining. So everything that you do in these lines, they have to add up to G, which should be your purchase price. Okay, so this number and the G should equal out to be the same. That is the breakdown of your financial terms and conditions. You will also note that D, there are some additionals that can be added in here. All right. This agreement is contingent upon the buyer qualifying to assume the following existing loans: a conventional, an FHA, or VA. Now, why would this come into play? Sometimes the seller has a phenomenal rate. Okay, let's say that they were able to negotiate on their current loan a 3% rate. And the best that you can get right now by searching is in the fives. Okay, well, at that point, instead of you going through to a lender and trying to get a 5% rate, you can legitly go through, contact their lender, that seller, and assume their rate. Okay, now, if that's a doable feature for you, all you have to do is, instead of where this right here, the agreement of the loan portion, whatever amount that is left on their loan, you would put here, okay, and you would do the exact same thing. You would assume their rate. You would go through, put in how many years is their rate, is it adjustable or is it fixed, okay, and the seller agrees to provide a promissory note and the most recent monthly statement of all loans to be assumed. So basically, the buyer is assuming the rate of the seller. Is this common in today's day and age? No. But with people now getting 3% rates, 2.5%, I've seen some crazy rates out there. Will this be something that we do in the near future? Most likely. Okay. So this may be a more of a common thing. So good to know. E, the buyer to execute a promissory note secured by deed of trust per terms in the financing addendum. All right, again, if you don't use the item, you just put 0 in this spot. So commonly, the offers that you are going to be seeing, if you are the buyer, it's going to have a money amount here, okay? It's going to have the loan amount here, and then right before closing, they're going to want to see the remaining of the purchase price, the remaining balance, put right here. All right. So this is the balance of the purchase price, the balance of down payment in good funds to be paid prior to close of escrow. You're going to note the words COE. This stands for close of escrow. This is the day that the deal records, and it transfers from the seller's name to you, the buyer's name. All right. So this is the date that you should also be getting the keys. Once it transfers over, you officially own that date. You officially own that home or that purchase. So with that being said, these funds, if there are any of these extra funds left over, they must be transferred prior to. This is the key word. You can't be doing this the day of. Okay, you got to do this prior to the day of close of escrow. You got to get with your lender, and you gotta organize with your lender and the title company how to transfer those funds that are remaining and required of you to the title company prior to the close of escrow. All right, so just make a mental note of that. The end all be all in this scenario is whatever you add here all the way through A, B, C, D, E, F. All of these items and all of these different lines, whether it just be 0 because you're not using it, okay, 0 if you're not using it, need to equal the total purchase price right here. Now, with anything on this sheet, on this agreement, you're going to note the buyer's name, the property address, and the buyers will be initialing. Moving on, additional finance terms and contingencies. A, new loan application. Within so many business days of acceptance, the buyer agrees to submit a completed loan application to the lender of buyer's choice, and 2, furnish a pre-approval letter to the seller based on the standard factual credit report and review of debt and income ratios. If the buyer fails to complete any of these conditions within the applicable time frame, seller reserves the right to terminate this agreement. In such event, both parties agree to cancel the escrow and return the EMD, the earnest money deposit, to the buyer. Buyers shall use buyer's best efforts to obtain financing under the terms and conditions outlined in this agreement. What is this saying in a nutshell? You should always have your pre-approval done before you search for houses, okay? When we submit offers, it makes the offer look so much stronger if you are submitting the offer with the pre-approval, okay? If you are not doing it that way and you're looking at houses and then you're submitting an offer and then you're scrambling to go through and get a lender to loan for you, okay, and asking the lender, could you send me the pre-approval and all that good jazz, um, you must get that pre-approval to your agent so that they can submit it to the other side, the seller's agent, within 2 days, okay, or actually let's see here. They are going through, it's going to be whatever the amount of days are in here, whether it be 2 days, 1 day, it depends on however they're being written up. So you want to make sure that your agent has the pre-approval so they can submit. If that does fail and you do not follow that contingency, that guideline, okay, the seller can back out of this deal, all right, and you're back to square one. B, the appraisal contingency. Buyer's obligation to purchase the property is contingent upon the property appraising for not less than the purchase price. If after the completion of the appraisal by a licensed appraiser, buyer receives written notice from the lender or the appraisal that the property has appraised for less than the purchase price, a notice of appraised value, the buyer may attempt to renegotiate or cancel the RPA, which is also this form, also known as the offer, by providing written notice to the seller, a copy of the appraisal, no later than so many calendar days following the date of acceptance of the RPA. Note, everything date-wise is going to follow the date that they accept. So if we go through and we write an offer, let's say for the first of the, let's say uh, January 1st for number's sake, okay? If we write an offer on January 1st, right in here, this is when the date was written, and they don't accept it until January 5th, your dates of starting and all your dates are based on the date that they accepted, okay? The date that they accepted is the dates that all your contingencies start from, all right? So where, where was I? Okay, whereupon the EMD shall be released to the buyer without the requirement of written authorization from the seller. So what is this saying? This is stating that you have so many days to get an appraisal. All right. In the event that you put, let's say, 20 days in here, that means that you not only have to get the appraisal done, but you have to get the report back before 20 days. If the appraisal gives you any slack where, hey, we just can't get out there in time, we need you to note that we can't get out there in time, you're not going to have the report back until the 21st day. At that point, your agent will draft up an addendum to extend the appraisal contingency. Now, basically what they are doing is they are giving you more time to get the appraisal done, because if it goes past that date and you still have not gotten that appraisal back and that appraisal comes in super low, you cannot renegotiate or cancel because you went past the date of a contingency. So you have to pay attention to your dates, and go from there. Now, in the event of a low appraisal, you do have the ability to renegotiate. What does this mean? Let's say you're buying the house for $200,000 and the appraisal comes in at $180,000. At that point, the most common renegotiation is you going through and having the seller eat the difference. Okay, so they will reduce the price to the 180 because that is all the bank will pay is 180,000. The other renegotiation method is for you guys to meet in the middle. Meeting in the middle would be that you, the buyer, are agreeing to pay $10,000 of your hard cash over and atop the appraised value. Okay, sometimes that's hard for buyers to be able to swallow. You're literally paying more than the house is being said that it's worth. All right, so the other option is for the buyer to go through and pay the full amount. In this case, the shortfall was 20,000. So the buyer could go through and pay the shortfall completely. Very, very rare. Okay. And the last thing, you do have the ability as the buyer to cancel the RPA, the offer, and go after another house. Now make a mental note at this point, the 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 loss factor. Okay. You have already spent probably $200 on an inspection because you're going to do your due diligence and have the home inspected, and now you are also out for the appraisal cost. Let's say that's 500 bucks. So at this point, you could be out $700 or more. So it's always a thing to try to get the seller to go down and reduce the price so you can continue the deal. But typically, low appraisals, you do have to make a mental mindset that they sometimes do kill deals. All right. So I want you to note one big thing. Your date will go right here. This is the deadline that you have to get that appraisal back in order for you to have the ability to renegotiate or cancel. If you go past that date, you are up a creek without a paddle. Okay. I do also want you to note in bold right here, if this residential purchase agreement is not canceled in writing on or before the appraisal deadline, buyer shall have deemed to have waived the appraisal contingency. Furthermore, exemplifies what I just said. Moving on. C. The loan contingency. Buyer's obligation to purchase the property is contingent upon the buyer obtaining a loan referenced in Section 1C or 1D of the RPA unless otherwise agreed in writing. Buyer shall remove the loan contingency in writing, attempt to renegotiate, or cancel the RPA by providing written notice to the seller no later than so many calendar days. All right, following the date of acceptance of the RPA, whereupon the EMD shall be released to the buyer without the requirement of the written authorization from seller. If this residential purchase agreement is not canceled in writing on or before the loan contingency date, buyer shall have deemed to have waived the loan contingency. What is all of this saying? This is stating that whatever amount of days go in here, whether it be, I've seen 20, I've seen 30, I even see some people put the verbiage COE in there. COE states that you have until either this deal closes or it doesn't. Okay, either you can get the loan or not. Sometimes lenders can go through and think they have everything in the bag, everything's going great, and then something comes up and they just can't close your loan. Well, let me give you this scenario. Let's say you put 20 days in here, all right? And on the 20th day, your lender goes through and gives you that bad news that, hey, I'm sorry, we can't close this deal. You must cancel on that date, okay? You must get them to shoot you over a denial letter, and you must send that denial letter over to your agent for your agent to send it off to the other side to cancel the deal. If you get that verbiage after those dates, okay, which we see a lot of that with the .coms lenders out there, well, they will allow you to go through, think everything's good and dandy, no communication, and on the 21st day, and you have this in there as a 20th day, mind you, they'll let you know on the 21st day that I'm sorry, we can't do your deal. At that case, you cannot cancel this deal and get your earnest money back if they let you know after the fact. That is just poor communication on a lender, and they'll literally disappear into the night. That is why we go through and we highly recommend you use a lender that has been vetted and has been seen action in this state. Very, very, very important. Or if your agent is able to put in COE in here, that gives us so that we don't really have a deadline. We have until all the way up to close of escrow to be able to have our loan contingency solidified. Okay, so the best thing for a buyer is to have the word COE in here. Okay, all right, moving on. D, a cash purchase. Pretty self-explanatory. Within so many days of acceptance, the buyer agrees to provide written evidence from a bona fide financial institution of sufficient cash available to complete this purchase. If buyer does not submit the written evidence within the above period, seller reserves the right to terminate the agreement. The seller just wants to see that you do have the ability to buy this property. Okay, I have seen some people put in 2 or 3 days in here. Typically, if you're buying cash, I want to send that proof of funds with the offer because I want my offer to stand out and be more structured and more powerful than any other offer that they may be receiving as a seller. So what we usually would do is we will have our buyers go through and submit a photo of a bank account. I've even had buyers literally take pictures of stacks of cash with their driver's license or their name written somewhere. So food for thought. That is just some methods that you can go through and do to show proof of funds. The seller wants to see that you legitimately have the funds to do it. Do the deal. All right, number 3, sale of another property. A, this agreement is not contingent upon the sale of another property, okay, that is owned by the buyer. Or B, if checked, the contingent upon sale addendum is hereby incorporated in this agreement. What does this mean? This means that if it is checked, that means that you, the buyer, are going through and you must sell a house before you can buy this house. Does that make your offer look weaker in the eyes compared to an offer that does not have this? Absolutely. A lot of sellers do not want to deal with you or them having to wait on their house being sold until yours sells. It puts a lot of unknown for a seller, so just make a mental note of that. Okay. So, fixtures and personal property. This is going through and going to label all things that are fixed to the house, whether they be ceiling fans, fireplace inserts, um, ranges and ovens, okay, windows, all right, door screens, a whole bunch of different methods that are fixed to the house, okay? If they are plugged in or literally hardwired into the house, they are considered a fixture, all right? If you are wanting something um, that may not be considered a fixture. Maybe it's considered personal property, like a big screen TV or something of that nature. You can label it here that, hey, you want this to stay. All right, but if it's a fixture, it must stay unless they denote it in like a counter offer or what have you, that, hey, the chandelier in the living room is a family heirloom. We are taking that with us. Okay, if they do take something, they must denote it, so that you are not just caught blindsided, and they must replace it with something of similar stature. All right. So I see a lot of people try to go through after the fact and take down chandeliers, or ceiling fans are a common one. And they try to do it kind of sneakily, and they'll replace it with like something from Lowe's. Not going to fly. If it's fixed to the property, it has to stay. Number 5, the escrow process. A. Opening of escrow. The purchase of the property shall be consummated through escrow. Opening of escrow shall take place at the end of 1 business day after acceptance of the agreement. This is the date that your offer gets accepted. Opening of escrow at such and such title and escrow company, okay, and with such and such escrow holder, escrow officer, okay. So basically, this is going to be the title company. Let's just per se Fidelity National Title, and let's just say this is Melissa Moses, a title agent at Fidelity National Title. You will have that person as your point of contact to be able to facilitate your deal. All right. Now, I do want you to make a mental note in this scenario. You're going to see sellers try to push on you, the buyer, an escrow company. Why? Maybe because they're getting a discount if you use their escrow lady. Okay, I want you to be very clear on this. How does this affect you? You do not want a mom and pop escrow title company. Okay, because in the end, that title company that you are using here is going to be the same one that provides you title insurance. Where in the case that they go through and do a search on that house and verify that everything's clear and there's no encumbrances and all that good jazz, you don't want later on, let's see a year later, to find out that there is somebody claiming that they still own the house and what have you, and they're making a claim on your property, and to find out that your mom and pop title company has closed up shop and disappeared into the night. All right. You want a title company that is going to stand firm, and if they made a mistake in the initial purchasing of your house and did not properly verify that the house was clear to close and clear to sell, they will eat and make it up to you. Okay, they're gonna have to make you whole with proper title insurance. So very, very key that you do not get bullied here and get forced into using a mom and pop title company. You want one of the big guns in town. All right, food for thought. B, earnest money. We talked about this a little bit in above. This is how much skin that you have in the game. Okay, upon acceptance, the buyer's EMD, as shown in sections 1A and 1B, if applicable, of this agreement shall be deposited pursuant to the language in the section 1A or 1B. You would typically wire this money. Okay, we use the example above as $1,000. Okay, you will wire this money to this title company. Before you do any type of wiring, you need to call your title agent, which is right here. Okay, I use the example Melissa Moses, for example. You will need to call her, and I want you to verify every single digit in the account number and every single digit in the routing number to make sure that you are not being taken advantage of by a victim of wire fraud. There are scammers out there that literally will send you fake emails of wiring instructions, and I want all of my clients and all of my agents' clients to go through and take an extra precautionary step to call that escrow officer to verify every single digit. Okay, once they confirm, you are good to go to your bank to send off that money to that escrow company. All right, again, like I said, most of your pages will have the buyer's name, the property address, and spots for you to do your initialing. All right, moving on. C, close of escrow. The date has come. You are now going to go through and put the date that you are going to take possession of that house. Close of escrow is going to be dated right here, shall be on or before a certain date. Typically it's 30 days. Sometimes I see it as 25, but just make a mental note that if your agent puts 30 days and they find out that the buyer and the seller can close a little bit earlier because everything's just jiving, all the loan stuff is all done, they will typically go through and talk to each other and see if they can get this to close earlier. So don't be tied down to this date right here, because this may change and may be able to enable you to close earlier. Make a mental note. If the date falls on a weekend or a holiday, the date may change to the next business day. Okay? Irs Disclosure. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. The IRS gets a cut of everything that goes on in the world, and they will note that the seller, if they are making a profit in any way, shape, or form on this property, that the IRS will know about it. All right. Title insurance, number 6. This is exactly what I was telling you about before. The title insurance, this purchase agreement is contingent upon the seller's ability to deliver good and marketable title as evidenced by a policy of title insurance, naming the buyer as the insured in the amount equal to the purchase price, furnished by the title company identified in sections 5A. Said policy shall be in the form necessary to effectuate marketable title. Definitely written by an attorney right here. Effectuate, that's a great word. Effectuate marketable title or its equivalent and shall be paid for a set forth in section 8A. What is this stating? Okay, this is stating that the seller must give you clear title. Okay, there cannot be any encumbrances. There cannot be anyone else that says that, hey, I own that house. The seller doesn't just own it by himself. I own a share of that house. It has to be completely clear when it transfers over to you, the buyer. Now, with that being said, if they go through and you lived in this house and a year later someone comes knocking on your door and says, hey, what are you doing in my house? I own this house, okay? You have a claim at the title insurance, okay, with the title company to go back to them and say, hey, I need you to go through, I have title insurance through your company. I need you to verify this claim. If they potentially own this house, I need to be made whole, okay? And at that point, they will go through and review your policy, and they will make you whole. Okay. Now, in the event that you went through some mom and pop title escrow company and they're not no longer in, or they went belly up, for example, you are up a creek without a paddle. That is why I advise all of my agents to not use the mom and pop places. I want them to use the big guns that have the buku cash, that have the ability to back up our clients in the event of such. 7. Buyer's due diligence. Buyer's obligation is or is not conditioned on the buyer's due diligence as defined in this section 7A below. This condition is referred to the buyer's due diligence condition. If checked in affirmation, sections 7A through C shall apply, otherwise they do not. Buyer shall have so many days, typically it's 10 calendar days following the date of acceptance of this RPA, this offer, as defined in section 23 here within, to complete buyer's due diligence. Seller agrees to cooperate with buyer's due diligence. Seller shall ensure that all necessary utilities such as gas, power, and water, and all operable pilot lights are on for the buyer's investigations and through the close of escrow. What is this stating? Okay, typically you will have this box checked, is, okay, and you will also have 10 calendar days in here. Sometimes this will change. Sometimes buyers want more time to do their inspections and what have you, but we don't care what it is. You have the ability to take however many days you put in here to be able to cancel this deal. It doesn't matter if you have a bad dream, okay, that hey, you woke up and after a hot sweat and you just have a bad, something in your gut tells you that this is a bad house, or you had an inspection done with, it has to be done before these days right here, and you got to get the report back before those days. And in that inspection, you found out that they have all these different issues. Okay, you have the ability to legit just cancel the deal. Typically, after an inspection and you find out that there's a whole bunch of issues, we have the ability, as long as we do it prior to these calendar days, you have the ability to go through and request a repair request. And if the seller goes through, they have a couple of options after they get a repair request. They can either fix all the repairs or they can tell you to kick bricks. And it doesn't matter, even if it goes and they don't respond for 15 days, so long as you sent that repair request within those amount of days that is labeled right here, these calendar days right here, you have the ability to still cancel based on their response if you don't like their response. Okay, so food for thought. These are your ability to cancel the deal after you do your due diligence or you just have a bad feeling about the deal. Okay, so that's a really neat feature to protect the buyers. Moving on. A, property inspection and condition. Now, this is we highly advise that you get a property inspection. Okay, you're going to note in this section. I'll just read it for you. During the due diligence period, buyer shall take such action as buyer deems necessary to determine whether the property is satisfactory to the buyer, including but not limited to whether the property is insurable to the buyer's satisfaction, whether they are unsatisfactory conditions surrounding or otherwise affecting the property, such as location of flood zones, airport noise, noxious fumes or odors, environmental substances or hazards, whether the property is properly zoned, the locality to freeways, railways, places of worship, schools, golf courses, etc. Okay, so any of these items, if you decide that you don't like them for whatever the reason, okay, you have the ability to go through during your due diligence period to, again, back out of the deal, okay? As long as you do it within those days right here, all right? Or any other concerns the buyer may have related to the property. During such period, buyers shall have the right to conduct a non-invasive, non-destructive inspection of all structural, roofing, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, heating, air conditioning, water well, septic, pool and spa surveys, square footages, and any other property and or systems through license. This is key. Licensed and bonded contractors or other qualified professionals. Seller agrees to provide reasonable access to the property to buyer and buyer's inspections. Buyer agrees to indemnify and hold seller harmless with respect to any injuries suffered by the buyer or third parties present at buyer's request on the seller's property conducting such inspection. So if the inspector gets hurt or you get hurt on that property while doing inspection, this states that you cannot sue the seller. Test or walkthroughs. Buyer indemnity shall not apply to any injuries suffered by buyer or third parties present at buyer's request that are the result of intentional tort, gross negligence, or misconduct or omission by the seller. So if the seller knows that there's something going on with the house that they should probably alert somebody to, they should probably alert somebody to so everyone's safe. Seller's agent and any third parties on the property. Buyer is advised to consult with the appropriate professionals regarding the neighborhood or property conditions, including but not limited to schools, proximity and adequacy of law enforcement, proximity of commercial, industrial, and agricultural activities, crime statistics, fire protection, other governmental services, existing and proposed transportation, construction and development, noise or odor from any source and any other nuisances, hazards, or circumstances. If buyer cancels this agreement due to a specific inspection report, buyer shall provide seller at the time of cancellation with the copy of the report containing the name, address, and telephone number of the inspector. So a mental note here, if you are going to cancel due to an issue that is within an inspection report, you must provide the report. All right. So basically, this is going to label all the different things that they're going to go through and inspect in the property, and what they do have to make non-invasive. This is very key. We see some inspectors that go in there and put holes in the wall and stuff like that. You can't do that. It's not allowed. All right. So B, buyer's right to cancel or resolve objections. If the buyer determines at buyer's sole discretion that the results of the due diligence are unacceptable, buyer may either no later than due diligence deadline referenced in section 7 cancel the residential purchase agreement by providing written notice to the seller, whereupon the earnest money referenced in section 1A shall be released to the buyer without the requirement of further written authorization from seller. no later than the due diligence deadline, okay, referenced from the section 7. Resolve, resolve in writing with seller any obligations buyer has arising from the buyer's due diligence. If you have any issues, or if you're within your due diligence time frame, okay, let's say it was 10 days and you're on day 9, so long as you draft up a cancellation request or advise your agent that you want to cancel, your agent will then draft up a cancellation request, have you sign it, we will send it to the other side, and you will be done with this property. That is your ability to cancel. You just have to do it before your deadline is up. All right. See if you fail to send that cancellation or fail to cancel within that time frame. You do have to note that you have waived the due diligence contingency. Okay, condition. So they're going to have you initial here, and they will have you initial here, stating that you do agree to follow that deadline. Okay. Now that is a huge feature. D, inspections. This is going through and what is exactly going to be inspected. Inspections. Acceptance of this offer is subject to the following reserved right. Buyer may have the property inspected and select the licensed contractors, certified building inspectors and or other qualified professionals who will inspect the property. Seller will ensure all the utilities, gas, water, power, and all operable pilot lights are turned on. Okay, again, they're going to have you sign the bottom, move on to the next page, and supplied to the property within 2 business days after acceptance of this agreement. They have to have the electricity on, they have to have the gas on. If you go through and you schedule an inspection and your inspector is letting you know that, hey, the power's not on, hey, the water's not on, hey, the gas doesn't work, that is a fault of the seller. Okay, so at that point, you're gonna have to reschedule your inspector, and your inspector will have to come back out at another day. Sometimes they even charge you, the buyer, for that fee. Unfortunately, I have seen this numerous times. I have never seen a buyer get compensated for that extra loss because of the seller's negligence. All right, so just make a mental note of that. Have your agent, and your agent, usually if they're a winning agent, will go through and be proactive, and will call the seller's agent to make sure the gas, the water, the power, and everything is on prior to your inspection. All right, moving on. So it is strongly recommended that the buyer retain licensed Nevada professionals to conduct inspections. We make sure that all of the inspectors that we refer are licensed. If any inspection is not completed and the request for repairs are not delivered to the seller within the due diligence period, buyer is deemed to have waived the right to the inspection, and seller's liability for the cost of all repairs that inspection would have reasonably identified have been conducted. Okay, had it been conducted, except as otherwise provided by law. The foregoing expenses for inspections will be paid outside of escrow unless the parties present instructions to the contrary prior to COE along with applicable invoice. What is this all saying right here? Basically, they highly advise that you get an inspector. They highly advise that if the inspector does find repair items, now mind you, cosmetic items, are you going to ask for those to be repaired? Probably not. We're talking major items of concern. Those are items that you're going to want to have the seller go through and either repair, or you're going to ask for a discount off the purchase price, or you're going to ask for the seller to go through and use your or do like a credit at closing towards your closing costs. Or the last thing that I've seen is you can have the seller go through and do a where they pay your professional, let's say your handyman, to do those repairs after closing. Okay, so there's multiple ways to handle the repair request. You just want to make sure that the items of concern are of major concern. Nothing really minor is going to get fixed. Sometimes we see like um, a light bulb is missing. That's not something that you would request a repair on. Okay, if the whole light is missing, then yes, that's something that you want to request on. Now another big thing here. The foregoing expenses for inspections will be paid outside of escrow unless the parties are present. Okay, contrary to the prior to the COE, along with applicable invoice. Typically, inspections are paid prior to closing, so they are paid directly to the inspector. Now, sometimes it's very rare. Well, they will have, we can negotiate it where the seller will pay for the inspection, and then the seller will go through and pay that at close of escrow. But most inspectors do not work like that. They want to be paid up front. All right. Moving forward, this is going to identify who pays for what. Is it the seller? Is it the buyer that pays for this? Is it 50-50? Is it waived? Or is it not applicable? Okay. Energy audit. So basically, this is going to go through and do an audit on the energy of the home, whether it be solar, whether it be what have you. Typically, if this is wanting to be done by a buyer, this is going to be a buyer expense. Sometimes I've seen the buyer negotiate where the seller pays for it. Okay. The home inspection, typically this is done by the buyer. Rarely do we see a seller pay for that. Termite and pest inspection. Now, if you are getting a VA loan, okay, VA requires this to be done, and they require the seller to pay for that. All right. If you, the buyer, are wanting this to be done, you, the buyer, will be paying for it. Roof inspection. Typically, a home inspection will cover a lot of the roofing inspection. So if you, the buyer, are wanting this to be done, you again will pay for it. But again, sometimes you can negotiate it where the seller pays for it. Okay. Septic and lid removal. Okay, or a survey. Okay. The home doesn't have a septic, it's going to be not applicable. Okay, survey typically it's not going to be needed unless you have a large lot of land that is going to be. So that is up to you whether you the buyer are going to pay for that, or if you're just going to have it not applicable or what have you. Fungal contaminant inspection. If you the buyer want this, you will pay for it. Okay. Mechanical inspection. If you have a lot of machines like farm machines and what have you on the property, or like a woodworking factory in the garage, and that stuff's transferring with the property, you can either pay for that to have those items inspected, or you can negotiate the seller to pay for it, or you can do something like of the 50-50 where you pay for half the cost of it and the seller pays for half the cost. A lot of these things are negotiable, okay? So you decide who pays for what. Pool and spa inspection, your home inspector usually will also do this inspection. So if you are having a pool and spa being inspected, typically that is a buyer expense. Soils and septic. A lot of these will be not applicable here in the Vegas Valley, but if you are doing stuff out in Pahrump, you will be negotiating on who's paying for these items. Okay, who's paying to have them pumped out, or who's paying to have them inspected. Okay, septic pumping. If it's literally overfilling, I have seen a property where the septic was overfilling the lid. Um, that was kind of crazy. We did have the seller pay for that. Bam, right there. Well inspection and well, uh, so another one is the quality of the water and the quantity. How much is it pumping? In the Vegas Valley, typically these are going to be NA because we don't have wells here. But if you are going to have those inspected, that is typically a buyer expense. Okay. Highly recommend if you are buying out in the Pahrump area that you definitely have those inspected. A wood burning device in a chimney inspection. If that is something that you want as the buyer, you can have those inspected at your cost. The septic inspection and the structural inspection, again, a lot of these are going to be NA, okay, because they just don't have septics here and what have you, okay. So that is the breakdown of who pays for what. E, certifications. In the event an inspection reveals areas of concern with the roof, septic system, well, wood burning, chimney device, or any possible presence of a fungal contaminant, buyer reserves the right to require certification. Um, the expense for certifications will be paid outside of escrow unless the parties present to the instructions to the contrary prior to COE along with the applicable invoice. A certification is not a warranty. So if you have to have somebody, a professional, come in here and 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 get like a recertification, you have to hire like a pro surveyor, or you found mold, you need to get a mold specialist to go in there. That is typically going to be a buyer expense and and what have you. Okay, so just make a mental note of that. Sometimes the inspector will go through and find an issue that he thinks that you should have somebody else go take a look at, someone that's certified in that. So just make a mental note that that sometimes does come up. F, all right. Buyer's request for repairs. This is what we mentioned before. You're going to have the inspector do his inspection job, and then at the very end, if there are anything of major concerns that you want to have repaired, we're going to draft up a inspection repair request. Now, with that being said, this has to be done prior to the due diligence ending. So if you're getting nearing that date and you need a little more time, as long as you draft up an addendum that states that you need a little more time for the due diligence to get these repairs requested and the valuation of what these repairs cost back by a third party or another party, maybe a handyman's giving you a quote, and you need a little more time, that is when you draft up an addendum to ask for more time. All right, so this is going to state, it is the buyer's responsibility. Let me reread that. It is the buyer's responsibility to inspect the property sufficiently as to satisfy the buyer's use. Buyer reserves the right to request repairs based on the seller's real property disclosure or items which materially affect value or use of the property revealed by an inspection, certification, or appraisal, items of general maintenance or cosmetic nature which do not materially affect value or use of the property which existed at the time of acceptance and which are not expressly addressed in this agreement are deemed accepted by the buyer, except as otherwise provided in this agreement. Brokers herewithin have no responsibility to assist in the payment of any repair, correction, or deferred maintenance on the property which may have been revealed by the above inspections, agreed upon by the buyer and the seller at requested by one party. This is basically stating that you as the buyer have the ability to request for repairs, and the brokers will not have to do anything as far as paying for those repairs or have any responsibility towards. Number 8, fees and prorations. Identify which party shall pay cost noted below, either the seller, the buyer. Are they going to split it 50-50? Is it waived or is it not applicable? Escrow fees. Okay, so typically this is a 50-50. The buyer pays their own and the seller pays their own. Now, is this negotiable to get the seller to pay for the buyer's portion as well? Absolutely. Is it negotiable for the buyer to want to make their offer even stronger and the buyer will agree to pay for all of the fees? That happens as well. All right. So the lender's title policy, this is going to be a buyer expense. You have to pay for your own title policy through your lender. Okay. The owner's title policy, that is going to be paid by the owner, okay, the seller. The real property transfer tax, that is typically paid for by the seller. The appraisal, okay, that is typically paid for by the buyer. Have I seen this go through and have the seller pay for it? Absolutely, I've seen it. Okay, is it common? Absolutely not. B, prorations. Now, any and all rents, taxes, interest, homeowner association fees, trash service fees, payments on bonds, SIDS, lids, and assessments assumed by the buyer or any other expenses of the property shall be prorated as of the date of the recordation of the deed, so the COE day. Okay. Security deposits, advanced rentals, and considerations involving future lease credits shall be credited to the buyer. All prorations will be based on a 30-day month and will be calculated as of the close of escrow. Prorations will be based upon figures available at closing. Any supplementals or adjustments that occur after close of escrow will be handled by the parties outside of the escrow. Basically, this is stating that if there's any money for, let's say the seller went through and paid a full year's worth of their HOA fees or their trash service fees. Well, and you're moving in at the exact 6 month, okay? So the seller would be getting a credit back of the overage that they paid, and then you're gonna have to go through and pay that overage. Okay, so you, the buyer, will see that the seller on the HUD statement, you're gonna see that the seller paid for a full 12 months, and they are gonna get their credit back for the part that they no longer own the house for. Pretty simple. That's called prorations. Okay, and your title rep will break that all down for you so that you are 100% crystal clear. C, preliminary title report. Within 10 days of opening escrow, the title company shall provide the buyer with a preliminary title report, the PTR, to review, which must be approved or rejected within 5 business days of receipt thereof. If buyer does not object to the PTR within the period specified above, the PTR shall be deemed accepted. If the buyer makes an objection to the item contained within the PTR, the seller shall have 5 business days after receipt of any objections to correct or address the objections. If within the time specified the seller fails to have any such exemption removed or correct each such objection, buyer shall have the option to terminate this agreement by providing notice to the seller and the escrow officer, entitling the buyer a full refund of the EMD, and B, elect to accept title as the property as is. So they can either go through and cancel, or they can agree to continue with the sale. All title exceptions approved or deemed accepted are hereafter collectively referred to as permitted exceptions. So basically, if there's anything that you guys disagree on as far as the buyer and seller of who pays what, that's going to be broken down and shown to you guys. Okay, so if there's anything that you think the seller should pay, you can go through and write an objection that, hey, I really believe the seller should be paying this, and they have so long to go through and either accept or reject your objection. If which in turn enables you to either cancel the deal to get a full refund, or you can just continue with the sale. That is what that is saying in a nutshell. D, this is an interesting spot right here, lender and closing costs. In addition to the seller's expenses identified here within, the seller will contribute so much money to the buyer's lender's fees and or buyer's title and escrow fees, including or excluding costs which seller must pay pursuant to the loan program requirements. What is this talking about? This is talking about some VA, some FHA loans. Oh, they're talking about it here. Uh, Different loan types, examples, FHA, VA, conventional, have different appraisal and financing requirements which will affect parties' rights and costs under this agreement. Example. So you have the ability as a VA, for example, to request, or it's mandated actually, that the seller pays for certain fees, such as the pest fee. Now, if you are going through right here and you are requesting, I'm buying the house for 200,000, but I want the seller to go through and give me $10,000 back from my closing costs. Is that realistic? Probably not. But I want the seller to give me 10,000 towards my closing costs, and I'll do the deal. So you're asking for the seller to contribute towards your fees, okay? So you would put $10,000 in that box right there. Now, some loan types also require you to go through and pay for like the pest inspection on a VA. So does this 10,000 that you're requesting include that amount for those extra fees, or is it excluding those extra fees? Typically, to keep the math clean, I will go through and do it as excluding. Okay, I want the 10,000 to be a clean number. I don't want a $50 pest inspection to be coming out of that number. I want to see that as a clean number on the HUD statement, and the seller also to pay for those additional fees. All right. E, a home protection plan. Highly recommend this. Buyers and sellers acknowledge that they have been made aware of a home protection plans that provide coverage to the buyer at the close of escrow. The buyer either waives the home protection plan or requires it. Okay, a home protection plan with such and such company will go here. There's a couple great ones in town. One of them is National Home Warranty. I believe they have the best ratings. Then there's Fidelity National Home Warranty. There's Old Republic. There's American Home Shield. There's a lot of them in town. Just go through and double check them, vet them, and look at their policies and what they offer. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Is the seller or the buyer going to pay for that home warranty? You will check either box, and your agent will talk to you about what you're requesting, okay? And then you got to find out what's the plan that I picked through this certain company, how much is it going to cost on that particular home? The plan may not exceed, if you're having the seller pay for it, let's say $700. That means that the seller, if you put buyer requires, the seller, so this box gets checked right here, requires, and this box gets checked right here through such and such company. That means that you are now requesting the seller to go through and pay for that home warranty up to a certain amount. Okay, so let's say the home warranty is $750 and you're having the buyer pay $700, okay, because there's an extra $50 in there for the spa, okay, to be covered. At that point, the buyer, will pay any difference in the shortfall. So the buyer will order the home protection plan, or your agent will actually order that on your behalf. Neither sellers nor brokers make any representation as to the extent of coverage or deductibles of such plans. It is the buyer's responsibility to look at the pamphlets, look over the plans, and pick the one that they want. Okay. Transfer of title. Number 9. Upon close of escrow, the buyer shall tender to seller the agreed upon purchase price. The seller shall tender buyer to the marketable title of the property free of all encumbrances other than one current real estate property taxes, of course, covenants, conditions and restrictions. So if there's any CC&Rs and an HOA or what have you, those will still be on the property. Zoning or master plan restrictions. Okay, so if there's any current zonings, like your home has to be zoned residential versus any commercial, those zonings will still remain as they were. Okay, and obligations assumed, any encumbrances accepted by the buyer prior to COE. If you are buying a house that you are acknowledging that the neighbor's house has a tree that's overgrown into your yard, and you guys have cleared it up, that is allowed to stay. This is stuff that you have agreed to as the buyer to allow. Okay. The buyer is advised the property may be reassessed after COE, which may result in the property taxes increasing or decreasing. This is a common thing. Sometimes a buyer will buy a house that's deemed to be 180,000, and then after it goes through and changes hands, the tax assessor says, "Oh my gosh, we did that number wrong. That house should be assessed a tax of 250,000." And you'll see your taxes go up a tiny bit. I don't want to scare you off or do anything of that nature, but it does happen. All right. Number 10, common interest communities, also known as HOAs. If the property is subject to any common interest community, CIC is what it's short for, CIC, seller shall provide at seller's expense the CIC documents required by NRS 116.4109, collectively the resale package. The seller must give this to you, okay? The seller shall request the resale package within 2 business days of acceptance and provide the same to buyer within 1 business day of seller's receipt thereof. So in a nutshell, if they're in an HOA, the seller must order this from their HOA. It's a packet that they physically have to order, okay? And then as soon as they receive it, they have to give it to you within 1 day of their receipt. Okay, so as soon as the HOA actually sends it to them, sometimes it takes 5, 10, 15 days, depending on how slow or fast the HOA is. They will send that to the seller, and the seller has to give it to their agent. Their agent will give it to your agent, and your agent will give it to you. And all that transpires as soon as they get it within 1 business day. Pursuant to NRS 116.4109, buyer may cancel Buyer may cancel this agreement without penalty until midnight of the 5th calendar day following the date of receipt of the resale package. If buyer elects to cancel this agreement pursuant to this statute, he or she must deliver via handwritten, prepaid U.S. mail or electronic transmission, a simple email, a written notice of cancellation to the seller or his authorized agent. What is this stating? This is stating that if you see something inside that HOA that you do not like, let's say for example, you own a electrical company and you have to have an electrical van parked in front of your house, and that HOA restricts any commercial vehicles, that would be a deal breaker. So with that being said, you have until the 5th day, the 5th calendar day, up until midnight on the 5th day to literally go through and say, I want to cancel this deal because I see that this line in the HOA prohibits my my commercial vehicle. Okay, so you have 5 days after receipt of that HOA docs to go through and cancel that deal. If the buyer does not receive the resale package within 15 days of acceptance of this offer, this agreement may be canceled in full by the buyer without penalty. Notice the cancellation should also be sent in writing, okay, pursuant to Section 24. So basically, if we get this example, if we get this accepted on the 1st, okay, January 1st, let's just use that date for an example. and this home is in an HOA, for example, and they do not send us the HOA resale package within 15 days from the date that we accepted this offer, okay, or they accepted our offer, you have the ability to cancel without any penalty, period. Okay, so you will get your EMD back. Upon such written cancellation, buyers shall promptly receive a full refund, of the EMD. The parties agree to execute the documents requested by the escrow holder to facilitate the refund. If written cancellation is not received within the specified time period, the resale package will be deemed approved, and the seller shall pay all outstanding CIC fines and penalties at close of escrow. Okay. So A, moving on, CIC related expenses. Who pays for what? Now note that the CIC demand is typically paid for by the seller. The demand is a breakdown of of everything that's going through on that particular property, on that HOA, like what's going on, all the rules and regs and all that crazy stuff. That is going to be in your demand. Okay, so that is a cost that the sellers are going to go through and pay. The capital contribution. This is also the CIC. What's going on as far as money and what have you inside that HOA. This is also usually typically paid by the seller. The CIC transfer fees. Now, this is the cost to transfer it from the seller to the buyer. All right. Typically, I've seen them as low as 200. I have seen that cost in certain areas, like example, Stallion Mountain, an HOA over in the north east area of Vegas. They charge as much as 1,100 to 1,500. Sometimes we see the sellers try to pass that off to the buyer to pay for that. But typically, you want the seller to be paying for all of these HOA fees because that is their typical responsibility. Um, 11. Disclosures. Within 5 calendar days of acceptance of this agreement, seller will provide the following disclosures and/or documents. Check applicable boxes. Okay, within 5 calendar days of acceptance of this agreement, you, the buyer, must receive the seller's real property disclosure form. Okay, so you also, if it's an open range disclosure, if it's an open range property that you're buying, let's say it's got some farmland, some animals, or what have you, you must get a disclosure of that. Or if your property is backed up to an area of farmland or something where animals may be able to range onto your property, you must be disclosed as such. Construction defects claims. Okay, if there's any construction defects claims or anything of that nature, it must be disclosed. There must be a form that you would have to have received within 5 days. Okay, lead-based paint. If the home is built prior to 1978, you must get the lead-based paint disclosure and acknowledgement. Okay, within 5 days of you accepting this offer or them accepting your offer. Moving on. Number 12, federal fair housing and compliance. Okay, there's laws that are in place that protect. Okay, you're not allowed to be discriminated against in any way, shape, or form based on all of these breakdowns. Okay, there are laws that protect same. 13. Walkthrough inspections of the property. Buyer is entitled to, under this agreement, to a walkthrough of the property within so many calendar days. Typically, I like to put this within 2 calendar days prior to the close of escrow date. I want you to go through, we will do a walkthrough of the property to verify it is and as it should be with none of the fixtures taken or anything of that nature. It is as you're expecting it to be where you buy it at close of escrow. So this is a nice way for you to walk through and double check everything, make sure all the lights work, make sure everything's as is as you're thinking. So we still have enough time to, if there's anything that's out of place, we can request it to be fixed. All right. So it's going to go through, you're going to go through all the major systems, the appliances, the heating, the cooling, the plumbing, the electrical systems, the mechanical fixtures are as stated in the seller's real property disclosure statement, and that the property and improvements are in the same general condition as when the agreement was accepted by the buyer and the seller. To facilitate the buyer's walkthrough, the seller is responsible for keeping all utilities on. Now, this is another thing that you want to have your agent. Your agent's usually going to be proactive and contact the other side to make sure that all the utilities, the pilot lights, the gas, the water, all that good stuff is still in operable condition. If any systems cannot be checked by the buyer on the walkthrough due to the non-access, no power, gas, water, the buyer reserves the right to hold seller responsible for defects and that which could not be detected on the walkthrough because of the lack of such access on the power, gas, and water. The purpose of this walkthrough is to confirm A, the property is being maintained, B, repairs, if any, have been completed as agreed upon. Okay, if you did a repair request, we need to make sure that those are all good. And C, the seller has complied with the seller's other obligations. Now, this is in bold for a reason. If the buyer elects not to conduct a walkthrough, okay, inspection prior to close of escrow, then all systems, items, and aspects of the property are deemed satisfactory, and buyer releases seller liability for costs of any repair that would have reasonably been identified by a walkthrough inspection, except as otherwise provided by law. Um, we try not to have our buyers waive the walkthrough. Sometimes you decide not to do it. In that case, if you're not in town to be able to do a walkthrough, it is best to go through, hop on a like a FaceTime message or a video message with your agent and have your agent, if you give them permission, to do your walkthrough on your behalf. Okay, it is very advantageous to have a walkthrough done so that we can verify that to the best of our knowledge that what we are seeing is as it should be. Okay, I would not waive your right to a walkthrough. 14, delivery and possession, delivery of possession. This is the fun stuff. The seller shall deliver the property along with all keys, alarm codes, garage doors, openers, and controls, and is, if freely transferable, parking permits and gate transponders outside of escrow upon close of escrow. So the seller agrees to vacate the property and leave the property in neat and orderly, broom clean condition and tender possessions no later than the date. Okay, so if they're going to check right here, it's gonna put it as the close of escrow date. Okay, a big X goes there. Okay, or a date here, a regular. They're gonna put in a date here. If the seller does not vacate the property by this time, seller shall be considered a trespasser. In addition to the buyer's other legal and equitable remedies, any personal property left on the property after the date indicated in this section shall be considered abandoned by the seller. Um, I had a seller once leave a 50-inch screen TV on the wall and then later try to call for it. Okay, I'm sorry, it is abandoned by the seller. That is now your property as the buyer. All right. Moving forward, this is another thing that you should note. Is the house going to be professionally cleaned? Not likely. Okay. They're literally going to leave it in move out condition. Sometimes they'll broom clean it. Sometimes they actually do hire a professional cleaner, but usually what we advise our agents to do is to use one of the cleaners. There's multiple that we have access to get in there and do a good deep clean prior to you moving your stuff in. All right. Food for thought. Broom clean is in no way, shape, or form clean in my eyes. Moving forward, 15, risk of loss. Risk of loss shall be governed by NRS 113040. This law provides generally that if all or any of the material part of the property is destroyed prior to transfer of the legal title or possession, seller cannot enforce the agreement and buyer is entitled to recovery of any portion of the sale price paid. If legal title or possession has transferred, risk of the loss shall shift to the buyer. Example: the property is now currently owned by the seller. Something goes on and the property catches fire. As long as it has not transferred over and you have not closed on that property, it is not transferred over to your name, being that COE, the close of escrow date, has not come, that is the risk of the seller. But let me give you this example. Let's say it is the close of escrow date and there's the title transferred at 5 o'clock, and at 5:30, okay, 30 minutes after the title transfer, that same fire occurred. At that point, it is the buyer's responsibility. That is the buyer's home at that point, and the buyer should have already have gotten insurance on that house. Alrighty, so there is a risk of loss in that regard. Just make a mental note of that. 16. Assignment of this agreement. Unless otherwise stated here within, this agreement is not assignable unless agreed upon in writing by all parties. Typically, we have something called wholesalers that are in our market. Well, they will go through and find deals. Example, they will go through and find a house for that's valued at 250. They'll make an offer of 200, and if the seller accepts, they will try to write something in the additional terms stating that they can assign it to somebody else and make a quick profit on the sale. They'll sell it for 225, for example, and they'll pocket themselves 25 grand at close of escrow. Not a typical thing with a normal buyer. Okay. Number 33 going on. So number 17, cancellation of this agreement. In the event this agreement is properly canceled in accordance with the terms contained here within, the buyer will be entitled to a refund of their earnest money. Neither buyer nor seller will be reimbursed for any expenses incurred in conjunction with due diligence, inspections, appraisals, or any other matters pertaining to the transaction unless otherwise provided here within except as applicable and otherwise provided by law. So basically, if you cancel the deal, you're not going to get your inspection money. Your $200 there is gone. Your appraisal money, let's say it's 500, for example, that you paid the lender to do the appraisal, that money would be out as well. Default. Typically, in the case of a default, mediation is the number one agreed terms. Before you go through and you end up suing each other, okay, before any legal action is taken to enforce any term or condition under this agreement, the parties agree to engage in mediation. They want you to come face to face with each other and try to hash it out. A dispute resolution process through Galvar. A mediator mutually agreed upon by the parties. Mediation fees, if any, shall be divided equally among the parties involved, notwithstanding or foregoing in the event the buyer finds it necessary to file a claim for specific performance. This section shall not apply. Each party is encouraged to have an independent lawyer of their choice review this mediation provision before agreeing to it. Okay? By initialing below, the parties confirm that they have read and understand this section and voluntarily agree to the provisions thereof. So basically, like I was saying, if you and the seller have a dispute, okay, you must go to a mediation process before you start suing each other. Okay, I will tell you this: I have been to one of these mediations before, and they literally sit you down with the seller at a table, and you're literally able to see face to face. I will tell you that humanism, where you are able to see each other and feel each other's issues, usually you can come to an agreement as civilized adults. It is probably one of the best features instead of just getting your lawyers involved to sue each other. Okay, I've seen my case where it was mediated, resolved, and it was just like done. It was so easy. So food for thought. I love this process right here. I've only seen it one or two times, so it's a great process. B, if the seller defaults, what happens? What do you do? Okay, so if the seller defaults, there's a performance. So I'm just going to read it. If seller defaults in performance under this agreement, buyer reserves all legal and equitable rights, such as specific performance, against the seller, and buyer may seek to recover buyer's actual damages incurred by the buyer due to the seller default. Specific performance is the ability for you to go through and attempt to force the seller to sell the house. Okay, if that doesn't work, you can go through and force the seller to pay for you for any actual damages that are incurred due to their default. All right. So this is usually when you will go through and perhaps get a lawyer involved and get them to do what they do. All right. Number C. If the buyer defaults, the only ramification that the seller has against you is to go after your earnest money. They can't go after anything else. All right. So that's that. So if you did do any additional deposit, okay, that was not considered part of the EMD, it will be immediately released. They cannot go after any additional deposit that you checked is not part of the EMD, the earnest money. But if you check that box that your additional deposit goes towards EMD or earnest money deposit, and then you default, not only will your initial EMD go, but that additional deposit will be going to the seller. Okay, the seller will want to grab that. Instructions to escrow. So this is the breakdown. This is what escrow is going to do. If this agreement or any matter related to shall be become shall become the subject of any litigation or controversy, the buyer and seller agree jointly in severalty to hold escrow free and harmless to any loss or expense, except loss or expenses which may arise from escrow holder's negligence or willful misconduct. Okay, basically what this is stating is that you cannot sue the you cannot sue the escrow holder that's literally just a third party holding the money. Okay, unless they messed up or did something wrong. All right. Unclaimed funds, a very, very rare occurrence. This is now stating that in the event the funds from this transaction remain in an account held by an escrow holder for such a period of time deemed abandoned, the state will go through and set up an account, and they will literally hold the funds, but there's a fee that is it shall be less than no more. Okay, here we go. So the fee is $5 per month that they're going to be charging. Okay, so the escrow holder is going to give the funds over to the state, and the state will typically charge you a fee. Make a mental note of that. Very Moving on, brokers' compensation and fees. Okay, brokers 21. Buyer herewithin requires and seller agrees as a condition of this agreement that the seller pay the listing broker and the buyer's broker, who becomes by this clause a third-party beneficiary to this agreement, that certain sum and or percentage of the purchase price, a commission, that seller or seller's broker offered for the procurement of a ready, willing, and able buyer via the multiple listing service. Any other advertisements or written offer. Seller understands and agrees that if the seller defaults hereunder, buyer's broker as a third-party beneficiary of this agreement has the right to pursue all legal recourse against seller for the commission due. In addition to any amount due the buyer's broker from seller or seller's broker, buyer will or will not pay the buyer's broker additional compensation in the amount determined between the buyer and the buyer's broker. We at Winning Realty have one of the lowest transaction fees. Our transaction fee currently is at $4.95. So you're going to note that in addition to any commission that the seller is going to be paying us, we have additional fees that we incur on behalf of our buyers, and we pass those directly to the buyer, but we have mitigated a lot of our expenses. So in addition to any amount due to the buyer's broker from the seller or seller's broker, the buyer this will be checked, will be paying an additional compensation in the amount determined between the buyer and the buyer's broker. So our fee is $4.95. Okay, that is known as a transaction fee. I will note that there are multiple brokers in town that charge anywhere from $1,100. I've seen a couple in the $14.95 range. So we give you a nice little break there. All right, moving on. 22. Waiver of Claims. Buyer and seller agree that they are not relying upon the representation made by brokers or the broker's agent. Buyer acknowledges that at COE, close of escrow, the property will be sold as is, where is, without any representations or warranties unless expressly stated here within. Buyer agrees to satisfy himself or herself as to the condition of the property prior to the close of escrow. Buyer acknowledges that all statements of acreage or square footage by brokers are simply estimates, and buyer agrees to make such measurements as buyer deems necessary and to ascertain actual acreage or square footage. So it is your job per se to verify any type of acreage or measurements or square footage. Okay, so anything that we're getting as a broker, it may have just been estimated by a seller, for example. So we want you to get facts. So buyer waives all claims against brokers or their agents for any defects in the property, inaccurate estimates of acreage or square footage. C, environmental waste or hazards on the property. D, the fact that the property may be in a flood zone. E, the property's proximity to freeways, airports, or other nuisances. F, the zoning of the property. G, tax consequences that the property may have. Or H, related to the buyer's failure to conduct walkthroughs or inspections. Buyer assumes full responsibility for the foregoing and agrees to conduct such tests, walkthroughs, inspections, and research as buyer deems necessary. In the event broker's liability is limited under any and all circumstances to the amount of the broker's commission fee received in this transaction. So basically, you agree that after you go through or before you go through that you are going to verify all of these informations to be to your liking, because once the house is purchased and it closes and it is in your name, everyone is waived of any claims that if they inaccurately gave you an estimate of anything of nature. So it is the buyer's job to verify those items and agree that they are accepting the house as is where is. Other matters. Number 23, definitions acceptance means the date both parties have consented to a final binding contract by affixing to their signatures in this agreement, and all counteroffers and agreed agreements and other counteroffers be delivered to both parties in section 24 herein. An agent is a licensee. The agreement is the actual document. The appraisal is the written value of the house. The bona fide means genuine. The buyer means you, okay, or the entity that you represent. The broker has to be a licensed real estate broker, okay. The business day, these are normal days. They are not. They're excluding Saturdays and Sundays and any legal holidays. That's what a business day stands for. A calendar day is from or to midnight, okay, midnight up until 11:59 ticks over to 12. Okay, that's when we have on our dates, on our calendar dates. CFR, Code of Federal Regulations. CIC stands for HOA. It stands for the Common Interest Community, formerly known as HOA. Okay, capital contribution means the one-time non-administrative fee or cost charged by the CIC upon changing of ownerships. The CIC transfer fees, the administrative service fee charged to transfer ownership records. So just extra fees that the HOAs like to charge. Close of escrow is the date that actually records into the buyer's name. Defaulting means that somebody just didn't pay or they didn't perform as what they agreed to. They defaulted. Delivery means that the agent transmitted via fax, which no one really uses anymore, email, overnight delivery, or regular mail. So it was delivered to the other side, giving them notice. A down payment is just that. EMD means the earnest money. The escrow holder is the person holding the money. FHA is the U.S. Federal Housing Administration. GALVAR, which is now LVR, okay, is the MLS for the Las Vegas Association of Realtors. Good funds means acceptable form of payment. Bad checks are not good funds. IRC, the Internal Revenue Code, okay. LID means the Limited Improvement District. You're going to see SIDs and LIDs. These are typically in new homes. These are just added costs that the local areas are charging to go through and do like the lighting, the new roads and stuff of that nature. And so sometimes there's extra fees, LIDs and SIDs. They have to be deemed out to you, okay, and notified to you. Not applicable means it's just not applicable. NAC means the Nevada Administrative Code. NRS is the laws. The party or parties means the buyer or the seller. PITI, PITI means the principal, the interest, the taxes, and the hazard insurance. Okay. PMI is the private mortgage insurance. Typically, this comes into play when you have not paid. Let's say you did a loan and or private mortgage insurance. So basically, you fell short of paying 80%. So if you do a deposit of 20% or less, okay, you will typically have a PMI, an extra insurance cost in your loan built in. PST means specific standard time. PTR, preliminary title report. Uh, Receipt, okay, means that it was received by the other side or by your side. RPA is what we are writing right here. This is the offer. The seller, okay, means the person that is giving the entity. The SID is the Special Improvement District. That goes with LID that was up here. These two are typically next to each other when they're extra fees, typically in new homes. The title company, that's pretty self-explanatory. That is the title company. The USC is United States Code, and the VA is the Veterans Administration. Blah. That was a chunk of words right there. So that is the breakdown of all of those. All right, 24, signatures, delivery, and notices. This agreement is to be signed by parties more than one copy, which when taken together, each signed copy shall read as one complete form. This agreement and documents related to the resultant transaction may be signed by the parties manually or digitally. They could be fax signatures, may be accepted as the original. So multiple people could be signing at different times, and it's going to merge all of their information to one form, is what that's saying. B, when a party wishes to provide notice as required in this agreement, such notice shall be sent regular mail, personal delivery, overnight delivery, by fax, by electronic email to the party, to the agent for that party. The notification shall be effective when postmarked, received, faxed, or delivery confirmed, and or read receipt confirmed in the case of email. Okay. Delivery of all instruments or documents associated with this agreement shall be delivered to the agent by buyer or seller if represented. Any cancellation notice shall be contemporaneously delivered to escrow in the same manner. So if we're sending an email, it's going to get timestamped. So it must have a timestamp so we can prove that, hey, we sent it on this time and it's within the time zones or within the time frame that we need to be having it sent at. 25, IRC 1031 exchange. Seller and buyer may make this transaction a part of the IRC 1031 exchange. The property electing to make this transaction part of the IRC 1031 exchange will pay all additional expenses associated therewithin at no cost to the other party. The other party agrees to execute any and all documentation to the effectuate such exchange. Some people go through and instead of just buying houses, they kind of swap them. They trade them. Or they sell one and they take the money and the proceeds from one and they go through and purchase another one. If that's the case and you are doing that, 1031 exchange, any type of fees that are required for you to facilitate your swapping, your trading of properties are your fees. You're not able to pass those on to the seller. Okay. 26, other essential terms. Time is of the essence. Very key. We have deadlines. We have to make those deadlines. No change, modification to this amendment or this agreement shall be valid or binding unless such change, modification, or amendment shall be in writing and signed by each party. If we are going to do an addendum to extend anything, we must do it in writing. There's forms that we follow to do our addendums to make sure that we are all in compliance. This agreement will be binding upon the heirs, beneficiaries, and devisees to the parties hereinto. This agreement is executed and intended to be formed in the state of Nevada, and all laws of this state shall govern its interpretation and effect. The parties agree that the county and state in which the property is located in the appropriate forum for action related to this agreement. Should any party hereinto retain counsel for the purpose of initiating litigation to enforce or prevent the breach of the provision hereof or any other judicial remedy, then the prevailing party shall be entitled to be reimbursed for the losing party reimbursed by the losing party for all costs and expenses incurred hereby, including but not limited to reasonable attorney fees and costs incurred by such prevailing party. So if you go through and get a lawyer and you sue the other side and the other side is found to be in wrong, the other side could be going through and paying for your costs for your lawyer should they be reasonable fees. I think those are the key words here, right here. Okay, so bam. It is a legally binding contract. All parties are advised to seek legal and tax advice before you sign anything. Okay. So that's a neat thing right there. This form has been approved by the Greater Las Vegas Association of Realtors. No representation is made as to the legal validity or adequacy of any provisions in the specific transaction in real estate. A real estate broker is the person qualified to advise on real estate transactions. If you desire legal or tax advice, consult the appropriate professional. This form is available for use by the real estate industry. It is not intended to identify the user as a realtor. Realtor is a registered collective membership mark which may be used only by members of the National Association of Realtors who subscribe to our code of ethics. Any addendums such as a contingency of sale addendum where you have to go through and sell your house before you buy another one. That would be right here. Any other types of addendums that are pertaining to the property, we will label them and list them all in this section. Any additional terms. If you want, you saw a chandelier in that house that you want, this is where you would write that right here. You would tell your agent, hey, I want that chandelier that's that they're stating that they want to take with them. I know it's a family heirloom, but I want it. Okay, so if there's anything of that nature, you would label those right in this spot right here. Anything additional that you want to be made part of the contract goes right here in this additional terms. Tell your agent, they will draft it up just however you want it. Okay, all this is going to be the buyers and the buyer's broker's information. Okay, if you are a relative to the agent, we must denote that so that all parties can be involved. Okay, if you are the agent, you would have to go through and note that as well. So if the agent does not have a relationship to you, bam, that would get check marked right there. If there is a relationship, let's say they are your family member, this box right here would get checked. If you are the agent buying the house, you would check that box right there. And the seller must respond by, I typically do 5 p.m. and I typically do, so p.m. right there, I would check that, and 2 days from the date that I actually write the offer. I give them a little bit of time. Unless I know there's multiple offers out there, maybe I'll make it 1 day, try to rush them along a little bit. The buyer will sign right here. The buyer will print their name right there, and the buyer will date and time right there. Typically, all this is done via DocuSign or electronic signing. And then the seller's information will go through right here as far as the seller's broker and the seller's agent will go right here. They will also denote if they have a relationship in the deal. The seller will also note if they are FIRPTA of foreign descent. Typically, this is going to go through and state that the seller is of foreign descent, and the IRS will withhold funds of their profits to make sure they pay taxes on it. Okay, so they're going to say yes or no, and then they are either going to accept your offer, they're going to counter offer with a whole nother sheet being presented to you, or they are going to reject your offer. Okay, and then they will sign as such. Now you will also go through. Notice you put your name. Your agent did this for you. You put your name and the property address, and you will be signing or initialing this spot right here. This, I want you to be very clear. This is not you accepting of this part right here. This is just you acknowledging that you have sent the offer over to them and you have initialed every single page. So when they go through and they accept, counter, or reject, it'll be if it's an acceptance, it'll just be done. It's on this same sheet. No additional forms will be sent. But if it's a counter offer, another sheet will get sent over. Okay, and you will see exactly what their new terms are. Maybe it's a price change. Maybe it's they want to use their title company, mom and pop place. Be concerned, or they want that chandelier. Bam. Okay, so they will note it in a whole different sheet, and you will be good to go. That is how you write an offer. I hope this helps you out. If you have any questions at all, consult your winning agent.